Guys, the bad news is Khabib's retired. The good news is 155 needs a champ, and there's a lot of guys who want to fill that seat. We're talking about who it could be next right now. What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So as always, the show moves on with in MMA. No matter how good you are, no matter whether you're undefeated, you're in GOAT status, when you step down and you step away and you say, I've had enough and I'm going to move on to the next chapter, the show just keeps on going.
Yeah.
And so what I'm talking about there is Khabib Nurmagomedov announced his retirement after his win, capping an undefeated career against Justin Gaethje. And unfortunately, I'm a little sad that we're not going to see Khabib fight anymore. I grew to be a big fan of his as his career progressed, and you know, it's really amazing to see true excellence in the octagon. You don't see it that often. But that being said, 155 right now just opened up completely.
Yeah.
Super exciting. So who do you want to see fight for the belt next?
Oh, well, there's a few fights and a few names that pop out right at when you first think about it. Obviously, Justin Gaethje, I think, has earned a right at the first shot at the vacant title. If he gets it, we don't know yet. The new fight that everybody's talking about, Dustin Porrier, Conor McGregor, the rematch, this time at 155, which, you know, last week, the McGregor team and everybody was coming out saying that they were going to have this fight at 170. I think now that title's on the line, they're more likely than not going to bring these guys back down to 155, have them compete there, potentially for that vacant title. And but yeah, it's so crazy to see that, you know, Khabib had such a monumental, historical event and career, and what he did in the octagon, even up to his last performance, was just masterful. But come Sunday morning, everybody just wants to know what's happening next, and we're guilty of that as well. So I'm super excited. I do think that there's a lot of fun to be had in the 155 division with or without Khabib. There was a few fights I still wanted to see Khabib compete in. With Tony Ferguson was obviously the one that was number one on everybody's list. The GSP one I was super excited for, but it's not one that I must see for the sake of the lightweight division, seeing as GSP's never even been there.
And that one may not have even taken place at lightweight. Right. There was discussion of that, but who knows, really. They could have opened up the 165 division. They could have done it as a one-off, what have you. I agree. Justin Gaethje's done a lot of heavy lifting. He's a super exciting fighter. Although he wasn't very competitive against Khabib, I do believe that he deserves at least one of the two positions, 50%, if you will, of the title. Well, not 50% of the title, but 50% of the seats in the game.
The main event, next title. It will be a main event.
For sure. But I believe that they're going to give it to Poirier and Conor. Yeah. I believe that they're going to come down it to 155 and not do that fight at 170. But and I don't really have much of an argument as far as that goes to say that either one of those guys aren't deserving. You talk about Khabib and his career. You talk about him losing one round, maybe. Well, who did he lose that round to? He lost it to Conor. Yeah. Conor's had the belt before. Dustin's had the interim belt before. Dustin does have a win over Gaethje in spectacular fashion. So I don't think you're going to get much argument out of people who say that, you know, that should be the fight. I like Michael Chandler's proposal. You know, Michael Chandler brings some new blood and new excitement into the division coming in from Bellator. He said, look, let me fight Ferguson and let Conor fight Dustin. We can even do it on the same night. Yeah. And in true Bellator fashion, let's do a tournament. And we don't even have to call it a tournament, but you have two fights that essentially four fighters, two will emerge as the winners, and those two will fight each other for the belt. So would you rather see the belt just go immediately to the Conor-Dustin fight for the undisputed title, or would you like to see it be a bit more of a difficult process to get that 155 strap, seeing as it is essentially arguably the most competitive division in the sport?
Well, both of those options make a lot of sense to me. I do think that a tournament, even though we don't sanction it and call it a tournament, title it and all that stuff, that makes sense, and it looks good, and really it's just whoever's the best on these nights gets to go. But I don't want to see the UFC have no champion sitting at 155 for too long, and I think the UFC is with me on that. I don't think they want to have just a bunch of top contenders that any of them could be the champion, but none of them get crowned. So I do see them, and let's just say they do fight on the same night. Conor, Dustin, Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson. That's going to happen more likely than not in January, because they did say Conor's going to be coming back, but early 2021. So we've got about 3 months until that could happen, and that's only the beginning of the tournament. I would venture to say that all 4 of those guys wind up in the hospital after their performances, because these are tough fights, probably the right 4 guys in the lightweight division. So then we're talking another 3 months after January at the earliest for them to get back in there and mix it up with one another. I don't know if the UFC is going to wait till April or May of next year to crown a lightweight champion. I always call them light heavyweights. A lightweight champion. That's why I do think that what they're going to do is it doesn't make sense to put Michael Chandler in a title fight in his first UFC fight. Yeah, bout. And Tony Ferguson, he deserves it, but I think they want to make that Michael Chandler Tony Ferguson fight, and Tony Ferguson would be down to fight him to see if they could, belong. I think that Conor and Dustin, the writing's on the wall. Those 2 are going to fight for the vacant title, and the luck is on the Irishman's side again.
As always, he always ends up smelling like roses somehow. Yeah. No matter what he does, he always seems to find himself in a good place.
Yeah.
But I'm not mad. If they do decide to do that, I'm not mad at it.
No.
You're talking about, and I do consider an interim champion a champion. I would say that Dustin Porrier is a former champion.
Yeah.
And I would say Conor obviously is a former 2-division champion. And to say that those 2 guys, they're high up in the rankings, that they aren't deserving, I think is a bit of a stretch. Personally, I wish they could do the tournament, but do it sooner. I wish they could make somehow the Dustin Conor fight happen in November or early December and put the Chandler and Kukui on that same card.
Yeah.
And then, you're talking about early next year doing a title. I think that UFC could hold out for that long
2 or 3 months.
Yeah, 2 to 3 months.
6 months is a long time.
Yeah, getting into April, May, you're talking about a title, especially in the most exciting and the biggest draw as far as divisions go.
Yeah.
That's too long to hold up the title. Also, I don't think the UFC wants to sit too long on Michael Chandler either.
No.
Michael Chandler said himself, I'm here for a good time. I'm not here for a long time. Yeah. I believe he's 33. If I'm wrong, he's 34.
Yeah.
He's reaching the end of his career. I would argue that he's still in his prime. He's still an excellent fighter, but he's not going to have the length of career in the UFC that he had in Bellator.
Right.
The UFC has made a sizable investment into Michael Chandler. He's gotten a big contract, which is part of what made Dustin so upset to begin with.
Right.
Was that he said, "How am I supposed to fight a guy that's making more money than I am?" And
he's never fought. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think for those reasons, you're going to see them kind of. I don't think that you're going to see Conor, Dustin, and Chandler Kukui on the same night.
No.
Just because I think they want to get moving. One, Tony Ferguson was one of the biggest assets as far as draw, and he had just this grassroots following and fan base, and rightfully so. He just suffered a bad loss, and they're going to want to see him try to right the ship. They're going to want to see Chandler, their new investment and their new potential star, get his first crack and introduce him to the UFC fans in a proper way. And so I think you're going to see Chandler and Kukui fight before you see Conor Dustin. That's just my prediction.
Yeah, I think Tony Ferguson's gearing up to fight towards the end of the year. I know he wants to, and Michael Chandler's clearly ready. He's on weight. I mean, he just made weight for a fight that he didn't even compete in. So
true professional, by the way.
Yeah, true professional. I think that, and they were talking to him at the 254 show, and they were kind of hyping him up a little bit there. I do think that while he's fresh on people's minds, it's good to get him in the octagon and get him competing. And just, throwing him to the wolves is the best way to get some notoriety and put some notice on his name, because he deserves it. But having no fights in the UFC, it's going to be a little bit of a tough sell, and he's got a little bit of catching up to do. And that's why I think they are going to throw him to the wolves. Tony Ferguson is the top of the top. You're talking about arguably one of the best lightweights of all time that just happened to stumble in his last fight. But who who's gonna blame him? He lost to Justin Gaethje, and that Justin Gaethje was a perfect Justin Gaethje that executed his game plan perfectly. Justin also said that he wants to compete before the end of the year, another 8 weeks or so, which he said that he went out in a way that didn't really affect him mentally or physically, and just being put to sleep means that he could get right back to work and get right back into fight shape within a couple weeks or a couple months. So
you could get put to sleep for a lot of the people that don't know.
Yeah.
I've seen people in jiu-jitsu class and in grappling get put to sleep in live rolling. We do like 5-minute sessions, rounds with other people in class. And so you do a 5-minute session. I've seen somebody get put to sleep. They took the next 5-minute session off, got some water, recomposed themselves, and then they were back in there again.
Right.
Not saying that I advise that, but that
it
is
can be done.
A matter of fact.
You don't see boxers get back up there after getting knocked out. So
if you get put to sleep with a choke and then it gets released, no harm, no foul. You haven't done any real damage to your body. Khabib is not one that has a style where he's going to bust your face up unless he gets you on the ground.
Yeah, Justin didn't take too much damage.
He didn't take a whole lot of damage in that fight. And Justin Gaethje is one of the toughest guys in the UFC, probably in the world, just in general. So that's why I'm kind of torn, man, because I love the idea of, Conor Dustin potentially doing it for the belt, and then the winner of that fight taking on the winner of Tony Chandler. But at the same time, I'm having a hard time having this conversation without throwing Justin Gaethje's name into the mix.
Yeah, timing is everything in this sport, though, and he just fought. And they need to keep the ball rolling. I believe that's what they will do. And I think Justin Gaethje will get the first crack at a title. Whoever gets crowned the king of the lightweight division, they're going to have to deal with Justin Gaethje first, it's a nice position for him to be in. He doesn't have to. I'm sure he'd rather fight for the title, but if all he has to do is wait a couple extra months and then fight for the title, then he doesn't really lose much ground in the division. And people are, I've seen some people criticize it. Some people love it. Some people just absolutely hate it. The UFC is a business. And when you have an opportunity like they have right now to put your biggest star, the sport's biggest star of all time, in a title fight, you're going to do it. It just so happens that a week before that, he scheduled a fight with Dustin Porrier, who's also a number one contender, and rightfully so. So it's funny. Khabib kind of tricked all of us.
Yeah.
Because if we would have known he was stopping at 29-0, none of these plans would have been made. But all these plans got set. Then he throws a curveball at everybody. But Dana White and the UFC is like, well, we just basically signed, sealed, and delivered Conor versus Dustin as the number one contender. So now that Khabib's gone, that's probably going to need to become the vacant title shot. And what are we going to do with Michael Chandler? What are we going to do with Tony Ferguson? So I do think that it was just timing's a weird thing. Khabib kind of pulled a fast one on us through a curveball. We didn't expect him to retire after the other Saturday night's performance. But it makes sense business-wise and just to keep the progression of the division going to have Dustin and Conor fight next.
Yeah, most definitely. And so I have here pulled up the UFC lightweight rankings.
Yeah, let's hear them.
And so you have Khabib as the champion, obviously. Right. So that will go away when he, I guess, officially surrenders his title. Yeah. And I think he wants to enjoy a little time as the number one pound for pound fighter before, and rightfully so. He deserves it. That has made a certain someone very vocally unhappy. Yeah. And by that, I mean John Jones. He has been beside himself, to say the least, over this, which, I mean, you can't really expect much less out of John.
Yeah, very strange. Yeah. It was a very strange battle to choose to fight. I get where he's coming from, but at the same time, Khabib's never had any blemishes on his record.
Yeah. And there's no asterisk next to his name. John Jones had fights where at the end of it, you're saying, man, like the one you were at with Dominic Reyes here in Houston, I think Reyes got that one. No, that never happened with Khabib. And I understand that John was not, has been in more title fights and has been in fighting higher levels of competition longer. That's all fine and good. But you can only fight the person that's standing in front of you.
Right.
And when you dominate every single person for every single second that you've been in there, without a blemish, without an asterisk, without USADA drama, You got to at least put yourself.
And it's a tit for tat type of situation because you can make a great argument for Khabib, a great argument for Jones, and then George St. Pierre is obviously there. But for the sake of the argument, John Jones versus Khabib head to head. John Jones, I've got 10 more title defenses than Khabib. Okay, great. It's also in historically the weakest division the UFC's had in the past decade or more. Khabib's in the most difficult division that the UFC's ever seen or MMA has ever seen. I've finished more fights, and Khabib has more 10-8 rounds. So
right, and to me, a 10-8 round is like almost as impressive as a finish, or even more so in a lot of ways, because that means you just absolutely dominated and imposed your will without the other person who's a trained fighter who has prepared for months for this to game plan and beat you. They weren't able to do anything for 5 minutes against you. It was just a destruction.
And pound for pound is one of those ridiculous things where nobody really is ever going to know. Obviously, if Khabib stepped in there with John Jones, we know how that would end. But if they were all the same size, people would just have to go with who they think is going to win these matches. And a lot of times when you're ranking pound for pound, you can't help but bring out your bias side and who you like more and who resonates with you more. And that's fine because it's a hypothetical. But Khabib has earned his spot at the table. John Jones earned his spot at the table, whether he's got a blemish on his record or not. GSP, Anderson Silva, there's a few, Daniel Cormier, Henry Cejudo, all these guys are in the UFC's GOAT conversation. And they all deserve to be there. And depending on who you ask, what country you go ask these people in, they're going to have a different answer for you.
Yeah, who you ask and where you ask makes a big difference in that. But so back to the 155 ranking. So if you look at this, you take Khabib out of the picture. Right. You've got Gaethje at 1 as it currently sits. Right behind him, Dustin. Mm-hmm. Then Tony Ferguson, Conor McGregor at 4, Dan Hooker, Charles Oliveira, who I think Oliveira could actually be the dark horse in the 155 division. He's very, very skilled.
We need to see him fight against him.
I think if he gets another good win, he's going to be right in that mix to say maybe we talk about, depending on how the Chandler-Ferguson fight goes, maybe you give him the loser of that fight. But I think he's working his way. Paul Felder, I know he's retired but he's doing a great job with the analyst work, and so good on him.
Some would say that job he's got is harder to get than the UFC title.
There's less people doing that job than there are fighting in the UFC,
or champions in the UFC.
Yeah, and then you've got Diego Ferreira, Al Iaquinta, and then rounding off the top 10 is Kevin Lee.
Yeah,
Kevin has had some blemishes and some speed bumps along his young journey, but he is still a very young fighter, and he was still trying to find his camp. He's was in Vegas for a little while, and then he was up in TriStar with Faraz Sahabi. I think he's getting some good direction now, and I think Kevin Lee, I said it this year, but this year COVID happened, so that kind of was just a wash, but I think that Kevin Lee will have a breakout year next year.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely see it happen. He's a guy that's very emotional, and he wants to be a champion, obviously, but technical difficulties. He wants to be he wants to be a champion, and he has the physical attributes and probably the skills to have it. He just needs to sort out his game plans and all of that stuff. I can see that definitely happening. What if I could go back and before we knew that Khabib was going to retire, and if you could just go back 2 weeks, I would say that they should maybe send Michael Chandler out there. Don't try to line him up and verbally commit to him fighting Tony Ferguson, because I do feel like Tony Ferguson deserves a little bit more than somebody who's making their UFC debut.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing as the Leon Edwards versus Khamzat Chimaev. But what it should have done is Charles Oliveira probably should have been the guy to welcome Michael Chandler into the division. Let that be the third, the fifth and sixth fighters in the 4-man tournament, and then
the alternates.
And or the next round up. So, and then we could have seen Dustin Porrier, Tony Ferguson, like we were promised at the end of this year, which that didn't happen, but I think they would have been able to sort it out. And then before they scheduled Dustin and Conor, after Khabib retires, they see Gaethje in there, and then they stick the Irishman Conor McGregor in. to fight
Justin Gaethje
for the vacant title, and then you have basically the title fight, and then 2 fights lined up right behind it, which are perfect. Charles Oliveira, who I believe deserves a shot with Michael Chandler at least, and Tony Ferguson, Dustin Porrier, the fight we all wanted to see, but it just got pulled away from us.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like you said, timing is everything as far as making these fights go, and hindsight is always 20/20.
Right.
But I do agree. I think Kukui has done more than enough to not have to be the one to do the heavy lifting of welcoming Michael Chandler.
Winning 12 out of 13 in the UFC, that usually...
him and Dustin is a great fight. And then Conor Gaethje would have been an incredible fight. So essentially it would have been not a tournament. It would have been the number 1 contenders fight in Tony versus Poirier, and then Justin versus Conor for the vacant belt. And then you have Oliveira and Chandler fight, and the winner of that earns the prize of being the alternate for either one of those matchups that fall out. I'm with it. I mean, I do think that the Conor Dustin fight is going to go ahead as planned.
Yeah.
There's charity involved, there's promotion involved now, there's discussions of where it might take place, and maybe there might be fans there. And so I still think they make that fight. I do think it comes down from 170 to 155. Me too. But and I do think that they are ultimately going to do that for the vacant title.
For sure. Yeah, I'm super excited to see what happens. I think in the next few weeks, maybe a month, we'll know exactly where we're headed and how early we can see the lightweight title being put up on the line. But I have to think January 23rd is going to be a crowning moment for one of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, thanks for watching this latest Barnhill Brothers video. As always, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check us out where you listen to podcasts for the audio version of the brothers. And so let us know, what do you guys think about the 155 division now? There's a lot of talking points, a lot of parity, a lot of interest, and I think this belt is going to change hands. I don't think it's going to be one of those things where somebody holds it for
musical
years.
Chairs.
Yes, we're going to have a musical chairs couple of years at 155, which I think is super exciting. Was there anybody on that list that we didn't mention that you think, should be in the mix or in the discussion? Anybody you think could surprise the world and come out and steal the crown next year? Let us know in the comments. We appreciate it, guys, and hope you have a great day.
Peace.
Take care.